Hari Om, good evening everyone. So, tonight's topic is personal transformation. To me, it has always seemed like a mystery and a paradox that everywhere we look, we see change. The one unchanging thing about the world, the one unchanging thing about Mother Nature is she's constantly changing. Day gives way to night. The hot and humid days of summer eventually yield to the cool, brisk winds of fall. We see the garden in bloom, and then it goes to seed. There's change everywhere. If we even think of our own lives, if you can go back, let's say 10 years, let me ask you this: who's living in the same exact place? Who's living with the same exact people? Who's working at the same job? If you're looking around the room, very few hands are going up. Who has the same hairstyle? Okay, I'll get a little more subtle. Who has the same hair? And then the ultimate question, who has the same bank balance? The only ones who usually raise their hand are the ones whose balance has been consistently nil. So there's change everywhere. So the question comes, when we find ourselves stuck in certain patterns, attitudes, behaviors, why do we feel that it's so hard to make changes? Do we feel that way? Or am I the only one here? That when you really want to change something that's been established, it seems very difficult while we live in a sea of change. So I have pondered over that mystery, and what I will share with you tonight is just an overview of what I think are 4 main factors for why we get stuck or can't make changes, and then 3 strategies to help us make change. From where I sit, it looks like the main things that prevent us from making change, number 1, we don't believe we can. Number 2, we give up too soon. Number 3, karmic forces may be in play. And number 4, and the most subtle in a way, we're attached to those things we say we wish to change. Okay? I'm going to go through them one by one. The number 1 reason we don't make change, we don't believe we can. Sometimes among spiritual seekers, low self-esteem or feelings of unworthiness masquerade as humility. Now, to my thinking, humility has nothing to do with thinking poorly of oneself. Humility means you recognize that you have a small but essential role to play in this dance of creation, along with 7 billion other people and untold numbers of creatures. And a sense of unworthiness is just as out of tune with reality as an overinflated sense of self-importance. The truth of the matter is we're all endowed with certain gifts, talents, capacities, and duties accordingly. And we're each as worthy as the next to grow, heal, transform, and experience happiness in life. The Yoga Sutras list doubt as one of the 9 main obstacles on the path. Someone may wonder, why is doubt so serious? And the images that come to mind for me are, picture a huge pot of nectar, and then take a little thimble of poison and pour it into the pot of nectar. What do we have now? Do we have a big pot of nectar with a little section of poison? We have a huge pot of poison. Or it's like taking a little grain of sand and putting it within a complex machine that has many gears. That tiny bit of sand can bring the whole machine to a screeching halt. There's a principle in life: as you think, so you become. The mind has tremendous creative capacity. If you really believe something 100%, you can manifest it in life. But if there's a shaky feeling of, well, I'm not so sure, maybe yes, maybe no, you've lost the battle before you have even begun. Okay? So, number one reason we don't make the changes we wish to make. We don't believe we can. Our mind isn't 100% behind it. And sometimes we don't feel worthy. Worthy to be happy. Worthy to be healed. Worthy to have certain necessary things in life. Okay. Second reason we often don't succeed in making changes. We simply give up too soon. We get bored, frustrated, distracted. We give up. Any change takes time, especially if we're trying to change something that's been long established. The Tirukkural, one of the great scriptures from South India, has little couplets. And one of my favorites that I remember periodically on my path and keeps me going during difficult times is, most people give up, you know when? On the verge of success. And the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist scripture, echoes the same truth. It says, people usually fail on the verge of success. Therefore, give as much care to the end as to the beginning, and then there will be no failure. No failure at all. I read a story once from the life of Paramahansa Yogananda. He had an ashram in Southern California. And you know, at ashrams, people come and go all the time. And supposedly, at one time, a senior monk left. And at this person's departure, Yoganandaji seemed to become very distraught. And the rest of the disciples were confused. They thought, why is he getting so upset? People come and go all the time. So that evening, they went and asked, Master, why do you seem so upset at this one person's departure? And he said, you don't understand. Had she stayed one more day, she would have attained everything. What do we say? The darkest hour is when? Before the dawn. And he said, now there's no telling how many back roads and side roads and by roads she may have to wander down to get to this point again. Most people give up on the verge of success. Sometimes a little more effort will crown the whole. There's a little story about Thomas Edison and his invention of the light bulb. Supposedly, he failed 10,000 times before he finally got it right. And someone was once criticizing him for being such a failure, having to have failed 10,000 times. And he said, "You don't understand at all. I succeeded 10,000 times in finding combinations that wouldn't work." And he used to say, a formula for success: hard work, common sense, and stick-to-itiveness. Don't give up. Okay, the third reason that we often don't make the changes we wish to make: past karma. Yogis speak of 3 types of karma. Sanchita, the storehouse of accumulated karma from all your prior births. Prarabdha, that portion of the past that has become ripe and you're going to experience it in this life. And then kriyamana, the new karma that you are creating. Sometimes we face situations, we feel 100% behind making the change, we persevere, and it still doesn't yield to our efforts. At times like that, a very strong past karma may be in play. It's something you were born to experience this lifetime. But even then, the yogis still have something to do as a resource. Even if we can't change situations, even if we can't change things happening in our body or in our life, even if we can't make external modifications, we can always change our attitude or relationship to what is happening. And if you think about it a little bit, and this is a really subtle point, what we really care about in any situation are not the facts of the situation, but how they make us feel. You understand what I'm saying here? So sometimes we get frustrated and feel despair about things we can't change, forgetting all the while to focus on that which we and we alone can change, our own attitudes. And that's what's really important. And my favorite story in this regard is about Nasruddin, the great Sufi mystic. Once he decided to grow a flower garden. And along with all the beautiful flowers, a huge crop of dandelions came up, which he didn't like. So he went to all the gardeners in town and asked, "What can I do to eliminate the dandelions?" He tried every one of their remedies to no avail. So he decided to journey to the palace to speak to the royal gardener. The royal gardener offered all the same solutions. Nasruddin said, I tried it. So the gardener from the palace went into a deep, silent meditation. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at Nasruddin and he said, "There is only one solution to your problem. Learn to love dandelions." I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Serenity Prayer. Are people familiar with it here? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And once you have done everything in your capacity to make a change occur, if it does not, then accept and move to a deeper level. Everyone see that? Okay. The fourth reason we don't make changes is very often we may say we may want to make a change, but deep, deep down, we're attached to the thing we think we want to change. It might be part of our personal identity. It might serve as a compass through which we make decisions and navigate through life. It might shield us from dealing with other issues that we don't want to face. So we cling to something that, for all outer purposes, we don't want, but deep inside, it is helping us in some way. And we think the ways it is helping us are more important than the discomfort and problems it is causing. Does that make sense to people? I'll give you a simple example that happens all too frequently in life. Someone will get into a bad relationship, and they'll come to you heartbroken that they're stuck in this awful situation. Eventually, they'll get out of the situation, and a little ways down the road, they're back again in a similar type of situation. And you see the pattern repeat and repeat and repeat. So, with their full heart, they don't want that bad relationship. But if they look deeper within, they may choose that over things like loneliness, comfort, security, financial resources. There are other things in play. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyway, that's just a quick overview of some of the reasons we don't undergo the transformative effects we want to see in our life. Now I'm going to give you 3 strategies to make those types of transformations we want. And they deal with different aspects of our being, different temperaments. The first involves using the will, focusing the mind, applying effort. Does anyone here move through life in that mode at all? Anyone? A few. Well, again, the mind has tremendous power, and you can harness it with focus and intention. The first way to make change using your will is to have the willingness to make the change. The second step is very powerful and very important. It involves setting an intention. This is what I want to accomplish. Attention is so powerful and so important. We live in an infinite ocean of cosmic energy. When we set an intention, we align ourselves to receive that energy in a particular way, in a particular direction. Setting an intention is like planting a seed in the mind. It will grow. It will flourish. Setting an intention is like installing new software in the mind that will run in the background, recording experiences, learning from them, and moving you in a certain direction. You set an intention, you look at your goal, then you divide the goal into doable steps. Rome wasn't built in a day. Big changes don't usually happen with great leaps. It's small steps cumulatively building on one another. So you make your doable steps, and then the final thing, make a sankalpa. Swami Satchidananda used to speak about sankalpas. A sankalpa is a resolve that's so strong, every cell, every atom of your being will hear and obey. And with that sort of template, you can make tremendous change. Another couple of things to think about when using the will, formulating affirmations. Make them short. Make them in the present tense. The subconscious mind is very literal. If you say, I will be healthy, you postpone it to the future. Instead, affirm, I am an embodiment of perfect health. And if you want to make it really strong, those of you who especially do mantra meditation, repeat your affirmation several times before the repetition of the mantra. And there's a subtle mystical science that comes into play. When you do that, the power of the mantra then goes to fulfill the intention behind your affirmation. This, by the way, is why in our morning meditation routine here at the ashram, toward the end, before we go into the silent period, we repeat that long affirmation. May the sacred mantra develop the holy vibration in me to help me have the divine grace, wisdom and prosperity, and to retain my health, purity, and peace. May I dedicate the benefits of my attainments to the service of God and the entire creation. Knowingly or unknowingly, when we then repeat the mantra, it's going to back that affirmation. And another way we can use our will is employing the practice of Pratipaksha Bhavana. And I would tell the people who are on the retreat, if you take home with you nothing other than the practice of Pratipaksha Bhavana, you've gotten enough to serve you for a lifetime and much more than your money's worth. Pratipaksha Bhavana means if there's anything you want to transform, an emotion, a habit, a behavior, pick a couple of words that sort of symbolize what that is, then pick a few words that represent what the opposite positive would be. Everyone understand what I'm saying? Then when you do your alternate breathing, as you inhale, visualize that along with the breath, you're drawing into yourself, again from an infinite cosmic source, those qualities you want. Feel like they're infusing you, suffusing every cell, every atom. And on the exhalation, let the negative leave with the breath. I will tell you, if you do this twice a day for 5 to 10 minutes, every day for a month, you will begin to see a shift. And that, with long practice, even very deep, long-standing patterns can be uprooted. I say this with the conviction of personal experience behind it. It's so powerful. It's the yogic version of the power of positive thinking. And you're combining focused thought with prana, cosmic energy. It's the most powerful combo in the universe. Okay? So moving along. Not everyone is will-oriented. How many people are devotionally motivated? More emotionally based and look to help from a higher power, from a higher source to make changes in their lives. So, if you're not will-oriented, or if you've tried that and it's failed, Gurudev once called me to see him many, many years ago. I was facing a major obstacle. And he said, use your will to overcome this. And I was very will-oriented. So I left very inspired and encouraged, and I spent an entire year using my will to try to get through this, around it, over it, under it, with no success whatsoever. And to my surprise, after a year, he called me back to see him. I thought he had forgotten. And he said, so, how has it been going with your will? And I looked at him and I said, going? It hasn't gone anywhere. Nothing has happened. And he just started laughing. He thought it was the funniest thing he had heard. I wasn't very happy to see him laughing at all my efforts. And then he said, okay, now we have seen a good demonstration of what your will can accomplish. Okay, so what do I do now? He said, now, just throw up your hands and cry to God. Just cry with your whole heart. And I think for me, and I think it may be true for other people as well, until we've done everything our conscience tells us we're capable of, the surrender, the asking doesn't come naturally and isn't authentic. When we've really seen we've given it our all and it's not enough, then that surrender comes from a deeper place. Many great souls have said, no sincere prayer ever goes unanswered. Just like a mother, an earthly mother, can't ignore the cries of her child, our big mama can't sit quietly somewhere when our hearts are crying for help. The thing is, though, the fact that we get an answer doesn't always mean that we get the answer that we want. Imagine if you're a mother and your child comes from the bathroom and he's holding some razors and he says, Mom, can I play with these? I really like them. They're silvery, they're shiny. I want to play with them. What is the mother going to say? No. And what if the child says, but you don't understand. I really like them and I really want them. Is the mother going to say, well, in that case, sure, go ahead and play? No. Sometimes what we're asking for might look silvery and shiny, but in truth, in the big picture, it would be as a razor with respect to our higher good. So I once heard a minister, Reverend Schuler in California, say the following: sincere prayer is always answered, but If the idea is not right, the answer is no. Your prayer was heard, you got the answer. No. If the time is not right, the answer is slow. If you are not right, the answer is grow. If everything is right, then and only then is the answer go. Then you get what you want. But it doesn't mean the other times you weren't answered. And that's where faith comes in. For prayer to make that connection, it has to be rooted in faith. If you think of the higher power as a big battery and we're a little light bulb, prayer is the connecting wire, and faith is what gives us a strong connection. My favorite quote from the Bible is about faith. It says, if you have faith the size of you know how big a mustard seed is? It was probably the smallest thing in the everyday environment that he picked. If you have that much faith, you can say to the mountain, come hither, and it will uproot itself and come to you. But that isn't the end of the passage. It continues to say, and nothing will be impossible to you. Alfred Lord Tennyson said, more things are wrought by prayer than this world dreams of, and that is prayer rooted in faith. And a final thing about this path of surrender in order to effect change in our life. The image that comes to my mind is one of gadgets that have two ways of operating, battery or plug-in. Okay? When you operate on battery, there's limited energy. It repeatedly runs down and repeatedly needs to be replaced or recharged. If you plug in, you can draw all the energy you want, right? Well, I think most of us probably go through life most of the time as if we're on battery pack. We have limited energy, and we're repeatedly feeling like we don't have what we need for what we need to accomplish. We have forgotten there's a universal outlet. We have a plug. We can plug in and draw all the strength, guidance, comfort, and support that we need. Do you believe it? Yes. Okay, third strategy. One that's very popular in the West in particular, using the intellect, analysis, witnessing. How many people use that more than the others? Okay. Just shining the light of awareness on something you want to change is enough to make it happen. You don't have to use your will. You don't have to pray. Just observe. That is the power behind witnessing awareness. In science, there's a principle called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Is anyone familiar with that? It states if you simply introduce an observer into a situation, the situation will change. And we experience that all the time. Imagine if you're cooking a meal and eating it yourself, or cooking with others and eating with a group of people. Does having an observer change your behavior? I think significantly. You can think of what's going on in your mind like lots of children running around. If there's a pattern or behavior you don't like, it's like a mischievous child. What happens if a mother walks into a room where a child is getting into mischief? Will the child continue doing the mischief if the mother stands and stares at her? Or is she going to change her behavior? Coming into witnessing awareness is like introducing the adult within your own mind, stepping back, observing. The simple act of stepping back and observing divests the undesirable pattern of energy. It's like turning off a master switch. When you can observe something, it's clear that that thing isn't you. You can then understand it more clearly and release it. When you step back, those of you who know about the koshas, you go into the Vijnanamaya kosha, functioning with buddhi, rather than the Manomaya kosha, where the emotions, habits, reactive patterns, and instincts are. You go into the buddhi, where the discrimination, reason, and the capacity to choose new options resides. And you can make changes. You can respond rather than react to situations. And I'll share one experience I had that was a beautiful example of the power of observation totally transforming a behavioral pattern. It was at an Apple store in Florida several years ago. I was in Florida working on a project, and my computer had a nervous breakdown, so I had to bring it to the Apple store. So I'm right up at the Genius Bar, ready to turn my computer over to someone who looked like he was 12 years old. Here is 30 years of my life's work I'm handing over to someone who looks like he's 12 years old to help me solve this major problem. And just at that moment, in walks in this fellow. He was stocky, red in the face, brandishing some device. It was either a tablet or an iPhone. And he was mad. He was angry. He was shouting his way right up to the front of the store. And he began engaging one of the workers, and he continued to shout. He was gesticulating wildly, and the staff became concerned, and they called mall security. And sure enough, after a couple of minutes, the security guard came in. No one knew if this guy was going to pull out a weapon or whatever. He was that out of control. But the security guard came in. I was right up front, so he stood to the side, right where I was standing. And then he turned and he looked at this fellow who was raging, and he just crossed his arms and he watched. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. He simply watched. And this fellow began doing this because the power of the guy's gaze, was felt. He just kept doing this. And slowly, sure enough, his gestures became closer to his body. After a little bit longer, the tone, the volume of his voice began decreasing. The tone began changing. And I'll tell you, it took maybe 5 minutes, and this guy was calmly conversing with the fellow at the counter, working on how to resolve his problem. The security guard looked, a couple of more moments, turned around and walked out of the store, never having said a word or done anything. For me, it was a stunning example of the power of observation to effect change. And within us, there are two levels of the mind. The one that goes through all the actions and all the shenanigans, and the one that's always aware. So if we can cultivate the ability to pull back into that aware part of the mind, the shenanigans will slowly be exposed. They become embarrassed, and they cease to express themselves. So, in a nutshell, those are 3 strategies for transformation: working with the will, turning to prayer, shining the light of awareness. And the thing to remember always is that in this sea of change, change is always possible. Change for the better. Transformation of even long-standing obstacles and patterns. We can use our will. We can turn to prayer. We can shine the light of awareness. We can open our hearts to the grace that is always pouring toward us from that higher power, from Mother Nature, and from one another, and just open to possibilities. Greater happiness, peace, and freedom await us all. Thank you, and Om Shanti.